What if success isn't about talent or luck, but about habits anyone can learn? This audiobook will reveal the 7 powerful habits that can rewrite your life no matter where you're starting from. Are you ready to break the rules and win on your terms? Chapter 1. You weren't born averaged up. Let me start with a truth that might make you uncomfortable. You weren't born to be average. You weren't designed to blend in, play it safe, or settle for good enough. Yet somewhere along the way, most people accept a story that tells them otherwise. This story whispers that big dreams are for other people, that playing it safe is wisdom, that wanting more makes you greedy or unrealistic. This story is a lie, and today we burn it down. Think about this for a moment. When you were a child, did you dream small? Did you imagine a mediocre life? Of course not. Children dream of being astronauts, presidents, inventors, heroes. They don't naturally limit themselves. They have to be taught to do that. Society teaches us to lower our expectations. School systems reward conformity over creativity. Well-meaning parents warn us about disappointment. The media celebrates average as acceptable. Slowly, we learn to dim our light, to want less, to expect less. But here's what they don't tell you. Average is a choice. Mediocrity is a decision. Playing small is a strategy, a bad one. The moment you were born, you inherited something extraordinary, a human brain capable of creating realities that don't yet exist. You possess the ability to imagine, plan, and execute ideas that can change not just your life but the lives of others. This isn't motivational speak. This is biological fact. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, each capable of making thousands of connections. The number of possible neural pathways in your mind exceeds the number of atoms in the observable universe. You are literally carrying infinite potential in your skull. Yet most people use this incredible instrument to worry about what others think, to replay past failures, to imagine worst-case scenarios. They take the most sophisticated computing device in the known universe and use it to process fear, doubt, and limitation. This is the first habit we must break. The habit of thinking small. Winners understand something fundamental about human nature. We don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our identity. If you see yourself as average, you'll create average results. If you see yourself as someone who settles, you'll settle. If you see yourself as someone who plays it safe, you'll never know what you're truly capable of. The truth is, you were born with the same basic equipment as every person who has ever achieved anything significant. The same neural capacity, the same fundamental drives, the same potential for growth and adaptation. The difference isn't in your hardware, it's in your programming. Right now, as you listen to these words, your brain is physically changing. New neural pathways are forming, old patterns are being questioned. This isn't metaphorical, it's literal. Neuroplasticity research shows us that your brain remains changeable throughout your entire life. You can literally rewire yourself for success. But first, you must reject the programming that tells you to accept less than you're capable of. You must recognize that the voice in your head telling you to be realistic is often the voice of fear dressed up as wisdom. Being realistic about your current situation is important. Being realistic about your potential is limiting. Your current situation is based on past decisions and circumstances. Your potential is based on what you're willing to become. Here's what winners know that others don't. Your past is not your potential. Your current circumstances are not your ceiling. Your temporary setbacks are not your permanent identity. Every single day, ordinary people make the decision to become extraordinary. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't wait until they feel ready. They decide, and then they become. This decision to reject average, to demand more from yourself, to believe in your capacity for greatness, this is where your transformation begins. Not with techniques or strategies, but with a fundamental shift in how you see yourself and what you believe you deserve. You weren't born average. You've simply been living below your design specifications. The 7 habits you're about to learn will help you access the extraordinary person you were always meant to be. But it starts here, with this recognition. You are not meant for small things. You are not meant to live a cautious, careful, limited life. You are meant to discover what you're truly capable of, and then spend your life expressing that capability in the world. The average person waits for someone else to tell them they're special. Winners tell themselves. The average person looks for external validation. Winners validate themselves through their actions and results. This is your moment of decision. Will you continue to accept the story of limitation? Or will you write a new one? Will you keep playing small, or will you step into the fullness of who you were meant to be? The choice is yours. It's always been yours. And today we begin the process of rewriting not just your habits, but your entire relationship with what's possible. Your extraordinary life is waiting. Let's go claim it. Chapter 2. Habit 1. Relentless ownership. Everything changes the moment you say 5 words. If it's to be, it's up to me. This is the first and most fundamental habit of winners. Relentless ownership, not partial ownership, not ownership when things go well. Relentless, complete, unwavering ownership of your life, your results, and your future. Most people live as passengers in their own lives. They react instead of create. They blame instead of own. They wait for rescue instead of becoming their own hero. This passenger mentality is the single greatest obstacle between you and the life you want. Winners operate from a radically different paradigm. They understand that they are the CEO of their own existence. They don't wait for permission, approval, or perfect conditions. They take ownership of where they are. They take ownership of where they want to go, and most importantly, they take ownership of the gap between the two. Let me be clear about what ownership means. It's not about blaming yourself for things outside your control. It's about taking responsibility for how you respond to everything that happens to you. It's the recognition that while you can't control every event in your life, you can control your response to every event in your life. This distinction is crucial. You didn't choose to be born into your family, your economic circumstances, or your geographic location. You didn't choose many of the challenges you've faced, but you absolutely choose what you do with all of it. The victim says, "This happened to me, so I can't succeed." The owner says, "This happened to me, so how do I use it to become stronger?" Same event, completely different relationship to it. Ownership begins with brutal honesty about your current situation. Not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, but where you actually are, right now. This isn't about judgment. It's about accurate assessment. You can't navigate to a new destination without knowing your starting point. GPS doesn't work without first identifying where you are. Your life transformation doesn't work without the same honest assessment. Here's what ownership looks like in practice. You own your financial situation, not your parents' fault, not your boss's fault, not the economy's fault. Yours. You made decisions that led to your current financial reality, and you have the power to make different decisions that will lead to a different financial future. You own your relationships. The quality of people in your life reflects the quality of person you've been. The way people treat you reflects what you've accepted. The level of respect you receive reflects the level of respect you've demanded. You own your health. Your current physical condition is the result of thousands of daily choices about what you eat, how you move, how you sleep, how you manage stress. Every day, you choose your future health through your present actions. You own your career. Your current professional situation exists because of the choices you've made about your skills, your network, your work ethic, your risk tolerance. You've either invested in your growth or you haven't. You've either positioned yourself for opportunities or you haven't. This level of ownership can feel overwhelming at first. If everything is your responsibility, that's a heavy load. But here's the paradox. Taking complete ownership isn't a burden, it's liberation. When you're a victim, you're powerless. You can only hope that external circumstances change. You're dependent on other people's decisions, other people's moods, other people's priorities. You're waiting for rescue. When you're an owner, you're powerful. You might not control what happens to you, but you control what happens next. You're not waiting for conditions to change. You're changing conditions. You're not hoping for a better future. You're building one. Ownership creates options. When you take responsibility for your results, you also claim the power to create different results. When you stop blaming external factors, you start identifying internal solutions. But ownership goes deeper than just taking responsibility for outcomes. True ownership means owning your thoughts, your emotions, your energy, your attention. It means recognizing that your internal state is your responsibility, regardless of external circumstances. You own your attitude. Someone else's behavior doesn't determine your response. Their negativity doesn't have to become your negativity. Their drama doesn't have to become your drama. You choose your energy, your focus, your emotional state. You own your growth. Your education didn't end when you left school. It began. Your development is your responsibility. Your skills, your knowledge, your capabilities, all of it is up to you. No one else is coming to make you better. That's your job. You own your standards. The level of excellence you accept from yourself determines the level of life you create. Mediocre standards create mediocre results. Exceptional standards create exceptional results. You set the bar for your own life. Here's how to develop relentless ownership. Start by identifying one area of your life where you've been playing victim. Maybe it's your finances, your health, your relationships, your career. Choose one area where you've been blaming external circumstances for your situation. Now ask yourself this question. If I owned this situation completely, what would I do differently? Not what you'd hope for, not what you'd wish for, not what you'd wait for. What would you do? The answer to that question is your next action. Take it. Then take the next one. Then the next one. Ownership isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Every morning, remind yourself, I am the author of my life. I am responsible for my results. I am the solution to my problems. This isn't positive thinking, it's accurate thinking. You are the most powerful force in your own life. Ownership is uncomfortable because it requires you to give up excuses. Excuses are comfortable. They explain away your failures without requiring you to change. They let you stay stuck while feeling justified about it. But excuses are expensive. They cost you your dreams, your potential, your future. The price of ownership is giving up the luxury of blame. The reward is getting back the power to change everything. Winners understand this trade-off. They give up the right to complain in exchange for the power to create. They stop explaining why things are the way they are and start making them the way they want them to be. From this moment forward, you are the CEO of your own life. You make the decisions, you set the strategy, you determine the priorities, you create the results. If it's to be, it's up to you. This is where your transformation begins. Chapter 3. The invisible contract, holding you back. You're living by rules you never agreed to follow. Right now, as you listen to these words, invisible contracts are governing your decisions, limiting your possibilities, and keeping you trapped in patterns that don't serve you. These aren't legal contracts, they're psychological contracts, unwritten agreements about how life works, what you're allowed to want, what you're supposed to do, and who you're meant to be. Most people never even realize these contracts exist, let alone question whether they want to honor them. But here's the truth. Every limitation in your life can be traced back to a contract you signed without realizing it. Every area where you feel stuck is where you've accepted terms and conditions that weren't in your best interest. Today, we're going to identify these invisible contracts and rewrite them. Because you can't create an extraordinary life while operating under ordinary agreements. Let's start with the most common invisible contract, the agreement to play it safe. This contract says that security is more important than growth, that certainty is more valuable than possibility, that what you have is more important than what you could create. You never explicitly agreed to this contract, but somewhere along the way you signed it. Maybe it was when a parent warned you about disappointment. Maybe it was when a teacher told you to be realistic. Maybe it was when you experienced your first failure and decided it was easier not to try than to risk failing again. This contract shows up everywhere. It keeps you in jobs that pay the bills, but drain your soul. It keeps you in relationships that are comfortable but not fulfilling. It keeps you from starting that business, writing that book, or pursuing that dream. Because what if it doesn't work out? The agreement to play it safe feels protective, but it's actually destructive. It protects you from temporary discomfort by guaranteeing permanent mediocrity. It prevents short-term risk by ensuring long-term regret. Then there's the agreement to seek approval. This contract says that other people's opinions matter more than your own judgment, that fitting in is more important than standing out, that being liked is more valuable than being authentic. Under this contract, you make decisions based on what others will think instead of what you actually want. You dim your light to make others comfortable. You sacrifice your truth to maintain peace. You edit yourself to gain acceptance. But here's what this contract doesn't tell you. The approval you're seeking is a moving target. Different people want different things from you. What makes one person happy disappoints another. There's no way to please everyone, so you end up pleasing no one, especially yourself. Another invisible contract is the agreement to wait for permission. This contract says that someone else needs to validate your dreams before you can pursue them. Someone else needs to give you the green light. Someone else needs to tell you you're ready. This contract keeps you waiting for the perfect moment, the right opportunity, the ideal circumstances. It keeps you preparing to get ready to almost start. It turns you into a spectator of your own life, waiting for someone else to put you in the game. But here's the reality. No one is coming to give you permission to live your dreams. No one is coming to tell you you're ready. No one is coming to make it easy. Permission is something you give yourself. The agreement to avoid discomfort is another contract that limits millions of people. This contract says that comfort is the goal, that discomfort should be avoided, that if something feels hard, you should stop doing it. Under this contract, you avoid difficult conversations, challenging workouts, demanding goals, and growth opportunities. You choose the path of least resistance and wonder why your life lacks excitement, progress, and fulfillment. What this contract doesn't tell you is that discomfort is the price of growth. Everything you want is on the other side of something you've been avoiding. Your dreams are not located in your comfort zone. There's also the agreement to accept less than you deserve. This contract was often signed in childhood, when you learn to lower your expectations to avoid disappointment. It says that wanting more is selfish, that being content with less is virtuous, that your dreams are probably too big anyway. This contract shows up as settling for relationships that don't inspire you, jobs that don't challenge you, lifestyles that don't fulfill you. It keeps you in situations where you're undervalued, underpaid, and underestimated. But you weren't born to accept less than you deserve. You were born to discover what you're capable of, and then spend your life expressing that capability. Settling isn't humble, it's wasteful. Here's how these invisible contracts get created. They start as protective mechanisms. As children, we learn to adapt to our environment to get our needs met. We figure out what behaviors are rewarded and what behaviors are punished. We develop strategies for survival. But what works for a child often doesn't work for an adult. The strategies that kept you safe at 7 might be keeping you stuck at 37. The adaptations that got you love and approval as a child might be preventing you from creating the authentic life you want as an adult. The problem is that these contracts operate below conscious awareness. You don't realize you're following rules that no longer serve you. You just feel stuck, frustrated, or limited without understanding why. The first step to rewriting your contracts is making them visible. Right now, think about an area of your life where you feel stuck or limited. Ask yourself, what rule am I following here? What agreement have I made about what's possible or what I'm allowed to do? Listen to your internal dialogue. Notice the shoulds and can'ts and have tos. These are clues to your invisible contracts. I should be grateful for what I have might be code for I'm not allowed to want more. I can't do that might be code for I'm not allowed to take risks. I have to consider what others will think might be code for other people's opinions matter more than my dreams. Once you identify a limiting contract, you can consciously choose to rewrite it. Instead of the agreement to play it safe, you can create the agreement to grow boldly. Instead of the agreement to seek approval, you can create the agreement to be authentic. Rewriting your contracts isn't about becoming reckless or selfish. It's about becoming conscious. It's about choosing your agreements instead of inheriting them. It's about living by your values instead of other people's fears. Your life is governed by the contracts you've accepted. If you want different results, you need different agreements. The contracts you made in the past don't have to control your future unless you let them. Starting today, you are free to renegotiate every agreement that doesn't serve you. You are free to tear up contracts that limit you. You are free to write new terms for your life. What contracts will you rewrite? What limitations will you dissolve? What new agreements will you make with yourself about what's possible? The pen is in your hand. Your new life is waiting to be written. Chapter 4. Habit 2. Clarity over chaos. Successful people aren't faster than everyone else. They're clearer, while others are busy being busy. Winners have identified what actually matters and eliminated everything that doesn't. This is the second habit of winners: clarity over chaos. In a world that rewards busyness and celebrates multitasking, this habit is your competitive advantage. It's the difference between motion and progress, between being busy and being effective. Most people live in a state of constant chaos. Their attention is scattered across dozens of priorities, hundreds of notifications, and thousands of distractions. They mistake activity for achievement and confuse busy with productive. But chaos isn't inevitable. It's a choice, and clarity isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for anyone who wants to create extraordinary results. Clarity begins with a fundamental question: what do you actually want? Not what you think you should want. Not what others expect you to want. Not what would make you look good on social media. What do you actually want? This question is harder to answer than it seems. Most people have never taken the time to really think about it. They're so busy reacting to life that they've never sat down and decided what they want their life to look like. Without clarity about what you want, every opportunity looks appealing, every request seems urgent, every distraction feels important. You end up saying yes to everything, which means you're not truly committed to anything. Winners operate from a different paradigm. They get crystal clear about their priorities, and then they organize their entire lives around those priorities. They don't just know what they want, they know what they want most. This level of clarity creates what I call productive paranoia, a healthy obsession with protecting your time, energy, and attention from anything that doesn't serve your highest priorities. Here's how clarity transforms your life. When you know what matters most, decisions become simple. You don't agonize over every choice because you have a clear filter for what fits and what doesn't. Your priorities act as a decision-making framework that saves you time and mental energy. When you know what you want most, you develop the power to say no to everything else. Not maybe later, not let me think about it. No, this isn't rude, it's necessary. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that matters. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors of all time, attributes much of his success to what he calls his 20-slot rule. He imagines he only gets 20 investment decisions for his entire career. This artificial constraint forces him to be incredibly selective about where he puts his money. What if you applied the same principle to your life? What if you only got 20 major decisions, 20 significant commitments, 20 primary focuses? How would that change what you say yes to? Clarity isn't just about knowing what you want. It's about knowing what you're willing to sacrifice to get it. Every goal has a price, and clarity means being honest about whether you're willing to pay that price. Want to build a successful business? The price might be working longer hours for several years, investing your savings, and dealing with uncertainty. Are you willing to pay that price? Or do you just enjoy the idea of being an entrepreneur? Want to get in the best shape of your life? The price might be saying no to certain foods, getting up early to exercise, and prioritizing your health over social events. Are you willing to pay that price? Or do you just like the idea of being fit? Clarity means being honest about the trade-offs. It means acknowledging that you can't have everything, but you can have anything if you're willing to focus on it exclusively. This leads to one of the most powerful concepts in personal development, the power of the one thing. Instead of trying to improve everything at once, what if you identified the one area of your life that, if you improved it dramatically, would have the biggest positive impact on everything else? Maybe it's your health. You got in incredible shape. You'd have more energy for your career, more confidence in your relationships, and more mental clarity for your decisions. Maybe it's your income. If you doubled your earning capacity, you'd have more options for your family, more freedom for your lifestyle, and more resources for your goals. Maybe it's your relationships. If you surrounded yourself with higher quality people, you'd be inspired to raise your own standards, exposed to better opportunities, and supported in your growth. The key is to identify your one thing and then organize your life around it. This doesn't mean you ignore everything else. It means you prioritize ruthlessly. Here's how to develop clarity in your own life. First, conduct what I call a priority audit. Look at how you actually spend your time, not how you think you spend it. Track your activities for 1 week. Be honest about where your hours actually go. Then ask yourself, is how I'm spending my time aligned with what I say I want? Most people will discover a massive gap between their stated priorities and their actual behavior. Next, identify your energy vampires, the activities, commitments, and people that drain your energy without providing proportional value. These might be meetings that could be emails, social media that adds no value to your life, or relationships that are more exhausting than energizing. Create a stop doing list. This is just as important as your to-do list, maybe more important. What are you going to stop doing to create space for what matters most? Design what I call clarity rituals, regular practices that help you stay connected to your priorities. This might be a weekly review where you assess your progress, a daily practice where you identify your most important task, or a monthly planning session where you realign your activities with your goals. Develop protective systems around your priorities. If your health is important, create systems that make it easy to eat well and exercise. If your family is important, create systems that protect family time from work intrusions. If your growth is important, create systems that ensure you're constantly learning and developing. Remember, clarity isn't a one-time achievement. It's an ongoing practice. Your priorities will evolve as you grow. What matters most to you today might not be what matters most in 5 years. The key is to regularly reassess and realign. In a world full of distractions, clarity is your superpower. While others are overwhelmed by options, you're focused on what matters. While others are spread thin across too many priorities, you're going deep on what counts most. Clarity doesn't guarantee success, but it makes success possible. It creates the focus necessary to achieve difficult goals, the discipline necessary to stay on track, and the confidence necessary to say no to everything that doesn't serve your highest priorities. Your life is the sum of your focus. Where you direct your attention determines what you create. Choose clarity over chaos, and watch everything change. Techta 5. Why you still feel stuck. You've read the books, you've watched the videos, you've tried the morning routines, the goal-setting systems, and the productivity hacks. Yet somehow, you still feel stuck. You still find yourself in the same patterns, facing the same challenges, getting the same results you've been getting for months, or even years. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of people consume self-improvement content without experiencing lasting transformation. These aren't conscious thoughts, they're deeper beliefs that influence your behavior without your awareness. They create what psychologists call identity protection mechanisms, unconscious behaviors designed to keep you consistent with your current self-image. If your story says you're not a morning person, you'll find reasons to skip your early workout. If your story says you're not good with money, you'll make financial decisions that confirm that belief. If your story says you always quit when things get hard, you'll create situations that allow you to quit. This is why willpower fails. You're not just fighting against your circumstances, you're fighting against your identity. And identity always wins. But here's the good news. Your story isn't fixed. It's not permanent. It's not even true. It's just familiar. And since you're the author of your story, you have the power to rewrite it. The process of rewriting your inner story begins with awareness. You need to identify the limiting narratives that are currently running your life. These stories often sound like absolute truths, but they're actually just opinions you've been carrying for so long that you've forgotten they're optional. Here's how to identify your limiting stories. Pay attention to your self-talk, especially in moments of challenge or opportunity. What do you tell yourself when you're considering a big goal? What reasons do you give for not taking action? What explanations do you offer for past failures? Listen for phrases like I always, I never, I can't, I'm not, people like me don't. These are clues to your inner story. Notice what you do when things get difficult. Do you quit? Do you make excuses? Do you blame external circumstances? Your behavior under pressure reveals your deeper beliefs about yourself. Pay attention to what you're afraid of. Often, our deepest fears aren't about external failure. They're about internal exposure. We're afraid that trying and failing will confirm our worst suspicions about ourselves. Once you've identified your limiting stories, you can begin the process of rewriting them. This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about creating new evidence for a new story. Your brain believes what it repeatedly experiences. If you want to believe you're disciplined, you need to create repeated experiences of discipline. If you want to believe you're capable, you need to create repeated experiences of capability. Start small, choose one limiting story, and begin collecting evidence against it. If your story says you're not disciplined, commit to one small daily practice and maintain it consistently. If your story says you always quit, choose one meaningful goal and see it through to completion. Every time you act in a way that contradicts your old story, you're writing a new chapter. Every time you do something your old identity wouldn't do, you're becoming someone new. This process requires patience because identity change happens slowly. Then suddenly, you'll maintain the same habits for weeks or months with little visible change. Then suddenly you'll realize you've become a different person entirely. The key is consistency of action, not intensity of effort. Small, consistent actions that align with your new identity are more powerful than emphatic gestures that can't be sustained. Here's what's crucial to understand. You don't need to completely abandon your old story. You just need to update it. You're not becoming a different person. You're becoming a fuller expression of who you've always been capable of being. Your past doesn't disappear, but it doesn't have to define your future. Your failures don't need to be erased, but they don't need to predict your potential. Your current circumstances don't need to change overnight, but your relationship to them can change immediately. The moment you begin rewriting your inner story, everything changes, not because your external circumstances are different, but because you're different. You start seeing opportunities instead of obstacles, possibilities instead of problems, growth instead of failure. Your inner story is the foundation of everything else. Get this right, and every other strategy becomes more effective. Miss this, and no technique will create lasting change. The question isn't whether you can change your story, you're changing it every day through your choices and actions. The question is whether you're changing it intentionally or accidentally, in a direction that serves you or limits you. Starting today, you become the conscious author of your life story. What story will you write? What identity will you create? What version of yourself will you become? The pen is in your hand. The next chapter is blank. What happens next is entirely up to you. Chapter 6. Habit 3. Ruthless self-discipline. Here's a truth that most people don't want to hear. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. One day you're fired up and ready to conquer the world. The next day you can barely get out of bed. If your success depends on feeling motivated, you'll spend your life at the mercy of your moods. You'll start strong, fade fast, and wonder why you can't maintain momentum. This is why habit 3 is crucial. Ruthless self-discipline. Not the kind of discipline that relies on willpower, that's exhausting and unsustainable. I'm talking about systematic discipline. Discipline that's built into your environment, your routines and your identity. Winners don't rely on motivation. They build systems that make discipline automatic. Let's start by destroying a dangerous myth. The myth that disciplined people are naturally more motivated than everyone else. This is completely backwards. Disciplined people aren't more motivated, they've simply learned to take action regardless of how they feel. They understand that action creates motivation, not the other way around. They start before they feel ready. They continue when they don't feel like it, and they finish when they want to quit. This is how extraordinary results are created. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about designing systems that make good choices easier than bad choices. It's about creating environments that support your goals instead of sabotaging them. Think about this. Why do you always remember to brush your teeth, but you struggle to exercise consistently? Is it because you're more motivated to brush your teeth? Of course not. It's because brushing your teeth is systematized. You have a specific time, a specific place, specific tools, and a clear routine. Exercise, on the other hand, is probably left to chance. You hope you'll feel like working out. You hope you'll find time. You hope you'll have energy. Hope is not a strategy. Ruthless self-discipline means systematizing your success. It means removing the decision-making process from behaviors that serve your goals. It means making good choices automatic. Here's how this works in practice. Instead of hoping you'll eat healthy, you meal prep on Sundays. Instead of hoping you'll exercise, you lay out your workout clothes the night before and schedule your workouts like appointments. Instead of hoping you'll read more, you replace your phone with a book on your nightstand. You're not relying on willpower, you're designing environments that channel your behavior in the right direction. But systematic discipline goes deeper than just environmental design. It requires what I call identity-based discipline. Discipline that flows from who you are, not what you do. Most people approach discipline backwards. They try to achieve specific outcomes through force. I will lose 20 pounds. I will make 6 figures. But this approach creates internal resistance because you're trying to force behaviors that don't align with your identity. Identity-based discipline works differently. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, you focus on who you want to become. Instead of saying, I want to lose 20 pounds, you say, I am becoming someone who takes excellent care of their body. Instead of saying, I want to make 6 figures, you say, I am becoming someone who creates exceptional value. This shift is profound because it changes your relationship with discipline. You're not forcing yourself to do things that feel foreign. You're expressing who you are becoming through your actions. When you're trying to lose weight, skipping dessert feels like deprivation. When you're becoming someone who takes excellent care of their body, skipping dessert feels like integrity. Same action, completely different experience. Here's the framework for building ruthless self-discipline. First, identify your keystone habits, the behaviors that, when performed consistently, create positive ripple effects throughout your life. These are usually habits that require discipline, but generate energy, confidence, and momentum. For most people, physical exercise is a keystone habit. When you exercise consistently, you sleep better, eat better, think clearer, and feel more confident. One disciplined action creates multiple positive outcomes. Other common keystone habits include meditation, reading, journaling, and maintaining a consistent sleep schedule. The key is to identify which habits, for you personally, create the most positive downstream effects. Second, apply the minimum viable discipline principle. Instead of trying to be perfectly disciplined in every area of your life, choose 1 or 2 keystone habits and make them absolutely non-negotiable. This is crucial because discipline is like a muscle. It gets stronger with use, but can be overwhelmed if you demand too much too quickly. Better to be ruthlessly disciplined about one important thing than moderately disciplined about 10 less important things. Third, design what I call discipline triggers. Environmental cues that automatically initiate your disciplined behaviors. Your alarm goes off. You immediately get up and make your bed. You finish dinner. You immediately go for a walk. You sit down at your desk. You immediately review your priorities for the day. These triggers eliminate the gap between intention and action. They remove the moment of decision where discipline usually fails. You're not deciding whether to exercise. You're responding to a trigger that automatically initiates your workout routine. Fourth, build failure protocols, predetermined responses for when you inevitably break your discipline, because you will break it. Everyone does. The difference between winners and losers isn't that winners never fail, it's that they have systems for getting back on track quickly. Your failure protocol might be, if I miss one workout, I automatically do a 10-minute walk the same day. If I miss one day of reading, I automatically read for 5 minutes before bed. The goal isn't perfection, it's rapid recovery. Fifth, practice discipline stacking, linking new disciplined behaviors to already established routines. If you already have a solid morning routine, you can stack a new habit onto it. After you brush your teeth, you immediately do 10 push-ups. After you pour your coffee, you immediately review your goals. This leverages the momentum you already have instead of trying to build momentum from scratch. Here's what ruthless self-discipline looks like in practice. You have non-negotiable standards for yourself that don't fluctuate based on how you feel. You do what you said you would do when you said you would do it, regardless of circumstances. You understand that discipline is a skill that improves with practice. Every time you act disciplined when you don't feel like it, you're strengthening your discipline muscle for future challenges. You recognize that discipline in one area of your life strengthens discipline in all areas. The confidence you build by maintaining your exercise routine carries over into your work, your relationships, and your personal projects. You see discipline not as restriction, but as freedom. The discipline to wake up early gives you freedom to start your day intentionally. The discipline to manage your money gives you freedom to make choices based on what you want, not what you can afford. The discipline to maintain your health gives you freedom to pursue ambitious goals without physical limitation. But here's the most important aspect of ruthless self-discipline. It's not about being hard on yourself, it's about being reliable to yourself. It's about building trust with yourself through consistent action. Every time you follow through on a commitment to yourself, you're depositing into your self-trust account. This self-trust becomes the foundation for everything else. When you know you'll do what you say you'll do, you're willing to make bigger commitments. When you trust yourself to follow through, you're willing to set more ambitious goals. When you have evidence of your own reliability, you develop the confidence to tackle bigger challenges. Motivation gets you started. Habit keeps you going. But discipline, ruthless, systematic, identity-based discipline, is what creates transformation. Stop waiting to feel motivated. Stop hoping for perfect conditions. Stop looking for easier paths. The discipline you need is already inside you. You just need to systematize it, practice it, and trust it. Your future self is counting on the disciplined choices you make today. Don't let them down. Chapter 7. Burn the backup plan. There's a moment in every winner's journey when they stop playing to not lose and start playing to win. It's the moment they burn the backup plan and commit fully to their vision. This moment changes everything. Most people approach their dreams like they're dating, keeping their options open, maintaining escape routes, hedging their bets. They want the results of total commitment, without the risk of total commitment. But here's what they don't understand. The backup plan is the plan. If you have a comfortable fallback option, you'll probably fall back to it. If you leave yourself an easy exit, you'll probably take it. If you don't burn the bridge behind you, you'll probably turn around when things get difficult. This isn't motivational hyperbole, it's psychological reality. Having backup plans reduces your commitment to your primary plan. It creates what psychologists call moral licensing, the tendency to make less effort when you have alternatives available. Think about it. If you're planning to start a business but keeping your day job just in case, how much energy are you really going to put into making that business successful? If you're trying to improve your marriage but mentally preparing for divorce, how hard are you going to fight for the relationship? The backup plan feels safe, but it actually makes failure more likely because it reduces the intensity of your commitment. It keeps you playing at 80% when success requires 100%. Winners understand something that others don't. Commitment is a force multiplier. When you commit fully to a path, you access levels of creativity, energy, and persistence that aren't available when you're hedging your bets. Total commitment activates what I call survival mode creativity, the incredible resourcefulness that emerges when failure is not an option. When you burn the backup plan, your brain stops looking for exits and starts looking for solutions. This is why entrepreneurs who quit their jobs to start businesses often succeed where those who try to build businesses on the side fail. It's not because quitting your job is inherently better. It's because burning that bridge forces you to make your business work. But burning the backup plan isn't about being reckless. It's about being strategic. It's about recognizing that the biggest risk isn't failure. It's playing small. The biggest risk isn't losing what you have. It's never discovering what you could create. Here's how to know when it's time to burn the backup plan. When you find yourself putting more energy into your backup plan than your primary plan. When you spend more time preparing for failure than preparing for success. When your just-in-case scenarios start feeling more appealing than your what-if-I-succeed scenarios. Burning the backup plan requires what I call intelligent commitment. Commitment based on clear thinking, not emotional impulse. Before you burn any bridges, you need to have done your homework. You need to understand the risks, have a clear strategy, and be prepared for the challenges ahead. But at some point, preparation becomes procrastination. At some point, gathering more information becomes a way of avoiding decision. At some point, you have to stop preparing to get ready and start getting ready to start. Here's what burning the backup plan looks like in practice. If you want to start a business, you set a specific date when you'll leave your job, regardless of how ready you feel. You make the commitment public. You create accountability. You make it harder to quit than to continue. If you want to move to a new city, you put your house on the market, give notice at your job, and start looking for opportunities in your new location. You don't wait until everything is perfect. You create momentum that carries you forward. If you want to write a book, you announce a publication date, pre-sell copies, or sign up for a conference where you'll speak about your topic. You create external pressure that forces you to follow through. But burning the backup plan isn't just about external commitments. It's about internal commitment. It's about changing your identity from someone who tries things to someone who finishes things, from someone who explores options to someone who creates results. This requires what I call bridge burning ceremonies. Deliberate actions that make your commitment irreversible. You might delete the contact information for your old industry, sell the equipment for your previous hobby, or publicly announce your new direction. These ceremonies serve two purposes. They make it harder to retreat, and they signal to your unconscious mind that this change is real and permanent. Here's what happens when you burn the backup plan. First, you experience fear. This is normal and expected. Your brain interprets the lack of options as danger and tries to convince you to create new escape routes. Recognize this as part of the process, not evidence that you've made a mistake. Second, you experience clarity. With options eliminated, decision-making becomes simpler. You're not constantly evaluating whether to stay or go. You're focused on how to make your current path successful. Third, you experience creativity. Necessity truly is the mother of invention. When you can't rely on your backup plan, you discover resources and solutions you never knew existed. Fourth, you experience growth. The challenges that would have sent you running to your backup plan now become opportunities to develop new capabilities. You become stronger because you have no choice but to become stronger. But here's the most important thing about burning the backup plan. It's not really about the external action, it's about the internal shift. It's about moving from, "I'll try this and see what happens," to "I will make this work, whatever it takes." This shift in commitment changes everything. It changes how you approach problems, how you respond to setbacks, how you interact with others, and how you see yourself. When people sense that you're fully committed, they respond differently. They're more likely to help you, invest in you, and believe in you. Commitment is contagious. When you're all in, others want to be all in with you. But remember, you don't have to burn every backup plan in every area of your life simultaneously. Choose one area where you're ready for total commitment, one dream that's important enough to risk everything, one goal that deserves your complete attention. The world doesn't need another person playing it safe. The world needs people who are willing to bet on themselves, who are willing to risk failure for the chance of extraordinary success, who are willing to burn the backup plan and build the future. Your backup plan is keeping you from your breakthrough. Your safety net is preventing you from soaring. Your plan B is sabotaging your plan A. It's time to choose. It's time to commit. It's time to burn the backup plan and build the life you actually want. The bridge is behind you. The future is ahead of you. There's only one way to go. Forward. Health. Chapter 8. Habit 4. Emotional control in chaos. You can't lead your life if you can't lead your emotions. This is the fourth habit that separates winners from the rest. Emotional control in chaos. Most people are emotional reactors. Their mood determines their day. Their feelings dictate their actions. Their emotions control their decisions. They're passengers in their own emotional experience, swept along by whatever they happen to be feeling in the moment. But here's what winners understand. Emotions are information, not instructions. They're data points, not directives. They're temporary experiences, not permanent realities. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. That's not control, that's denial, and it always backfires. True emotional control means acknowledging your emotions, understanding what they're telling you, and then choosing your response consciously instead of reacting automatically. The ability to remain grounded under pressure isn't just a nice-to-have skill, it's essential for anyone who wants to achieve significant goals. Because here's the truth. The bigger your dreams, the bigger the emotional challenges you'll face. Starting a business will trigger fear, anxiety, and self-doubt. Building wealth will bring up issues around worthiness and security. Improving your health will confront you with discomfort and resistance. Deepening relationships will surface vulnerability and trust issues. If you can't navigate these emotional challenges, you'll retreat to your comfort zone every time. You'll quit when things get hard, avoid when things get scary, and settle when things get uncertain. Emotional control begins with understanding that you are not your emotion. You are the observer of your emotions. You are the one who experiences them, but you are not them. This distinction is crucial because it creates space between stimulus and response. Instead of immediately reacting to whatever you're feeling, you can pause, observe, and choose your response. Here's how this works. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you say, "I am experiencing anger." Instead of "I am afraid," you say, "I am noticing fear." This simple linguistic shift reminds you that emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent identities. The next step is developing what I call emotional intelligence under fire. The ability to think clearly when emotions are running high. This requires training, just like physical fitness requires training. One of the most powerful techniques is what I call the stop method. Stop what you're doing. T. Take a deep breath. O. Observe what you're feeling. P. Proceed with intention. This method creates a circuit breaker in your emotional reactions. It interrupts the automatic pattern and gives you a chance to respond instead of react. But emotional control goes deeper than just managing your reactions. It involves understanding the stories you tell yourself about what your emotions mean. For example, many people interpret anxiety as evidence that they're not ready or that they're making a mistake. But anxiety might simply mean you're doing something important. It might mean you're growing, might mean you're stepping outside your comfort zone, which is exactly where growth happens. Fear isn't necessarily a stop sign. It might be a compass, pointing toward what matters most to you. Discomfort isn't necessarily a problem. It might be the price of progress. Uncertainty isn't necessarily dangerous. It might be the space where possibilities live. Winners reframe their emotional experiences in ways that serve their goals. They don't eliminate difficult emotions. They change their relationship with them. Instead of seeing stress as something to avoid, they see it as energy they can channel. Instead of seeing failure as confirmation of their inadequacy, they see it as feedback for improvement. Instead of seeing criticism as attack, they see it as information. This reframing isn't about positive thinking or denial. It's about choosing interpretations that empower action instead of paralysis. Here's another crucial aspect of emotional control: managing your emotional environment. Just as you can influence your physical environment to support your goals, you can influence your emotional environment. This means being intentional about what you consume mentally and emotionally. The news you watch, the social media you scroll, the conversations you participate in, the people you spend time with, all of these inputs affect your emotional state. If you're constantly consuming negative news, engaging in toxic conversations, or surrounding yourself with pessimistic people, you're making emotional control much harder than it needs to be. Winners are protective of their emotional environment. They limit their exposure to negativity not because they're in denial about reality, but because they understand that their emotional state affects their ability to create positive change in that reality. They also develop emotional recovery protocols, specific practices for returning to their optimal emotional state when they get knocked off balance. This might include exercise, meditation, journaling, calling a trusted friend, or simply taking a walk in nature. The key is having predetermined responses for emotional challenges instead of improvising every time. When you're emotionally hijacked, you don't have access to your best thinking. Having protocols in place means you can respond effectively, even when you're not at your best. Another powerful technique is what I call future self-consultation. When you're facing an emotional challenge, ask yourself, how would the person I'm becoming handle this situation? What would someone who has already achieved my goals do in this moment? This question shifts your perspective from your current emotional state to your aspirational identity. It helps you access wisdom and strength that you might not feel in the moment, but that you're capable of expressing. Emotional control also requires understanding the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic, immediate, and often disproportionate. Responding is conscious, considered, and appropriate to the situation. When someone criticizes you, reacting might mean getting defensive, angry, or withdrawn. Responding might mean listening for any valid feedback, thanking them for their perspective, and deciding whether any changes are warranted. When you face a setback, reacting might mean giving up, making excuses, or blaming others. Responding might mean analyzing what went wrong, adjusting your strategy, and trying again with new information. The space between stimulus and response is where your power lives. The bigger that space, the more control you have over your life. Here's what emotional control looks like in practice. You can receive bad news without letting it ruin your day. You can face uncertainty without being paralyzed by anxiety. You can deal with criticism without taking it personally. You can handle success without becoming arrogant and failure without becoming defeated. You understand that emotional mastery isn't about never feeling difficult emotions. It's about not letting difficult emotions derail your life. You feel the fear and act anyway. You acknowledge the doubt and proceed with confidence. You experience the discomfort and stay committed to your path. This is how leaders are born. Not from an absence of emotional challenges, but from the ability to navigate those challenges without losing sight of their vision. Your emotions are powerful, but they're not in charge. You are. The moment you take back control of your emotional life is the moment you take back control of everything else. Chaos is inevitable. Control is optional. Choose control. We adopt their language, their perspectives, their behaviors, and their beliefs about what's possible. The problem is that most people choose their environment based on comfort, not growth. They maintain relationships because they're familiar, not because they're beneficial. They stay in social circles because they're accepted, not because they're inspired. But winners understand something that others don't. Your network is your net worth, but it's deeper than financial. Your relationships determine your thoughts determine your actions, and your actions determine your results. If you want to level up your life, you need to level up your environment, and that means making some difficult decisions about the people you spend time with. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or cutting people off without explanation. It means becoming intentional about your relationships. It means recognizing that your time and energy are your most valuable assets, and you need to invest both wisely. Here's how to evaluate your current environment. Look at the people you spend the most time with. Ask yourself these questions. Do they inspire you to be better, or do they make you comfortable being mediocre? Do they support your growth, or do they try to keep you where you are? Do they challenge your thinking, or do they confirm your existing beliefs? Do they celebrate your successes, or do they diminish them? Do they encourage your dreams, or do they remind you why they won't work? Be honest about these answers. You might discover that some relationships that feel supportive are actually limiting. Some people who seem like friends are actually anchors, keeping you tethered to a version of yourself you're trying to outgrow. This is why personal transformation can be lonely. As you change, you might find that some relationships no longer fit. People who were comfortable when you were playing small might become uncomfortable when you start playing big. Some people in your life have an investment in you staying the same. Your growth threatens their comfort. Your success challenges their excuses. Your transformation forces them to confront their own lack of growth. This is normal, but it's also a choice point. You can slow down your growth to maintain these relationships. Or you can maintain your growth and accept that some relationships might change or end. Winners choose growth over comfort every time. They understand that loyalty to people who limit you is disloyalty to your potential. But upgrading your environment isn't just about removing negative influences. It's about actively seeking positive influences. It's about finding people who are already where you want to be and learning from them. This might mean joining new communities, attending different events, reading books by people you admire, or following thought leaders who challenge your thinking. It might mean hiring coaches, finding mentors, or joining mastermind groups. The key is to put yourself in environments where you're the least successful person in the room. This might feel uncomfortable at first, but discomfort is the price of growth. When you're surrounded by people who are operating at a higher level, several things happen automatically. Your standards rise. What you previously thought was excellent becomes average. What you previously thought was impossible becomes expected. Your thinking expands. You're exposed to new ideas, different perspectives, and bigger possibilities. You start thinking beyond your current limitations. Your network grows. High-performing people know other high-performing people. One quality relationship can open doors to dozens of others. Your confidence increases. When you see regular people achieving extraordinary things, you realize that extraordinary isn't as rare as you thought. You start believing it's possible for you too. But here's what's crucial to understand. You don't just get to join these environments. You have to earn your place in them. High-quality people are selective about who they spend time with, just like you should be. This means you need to bring value to the relationships you want to build. You need to be useful, interesting, or inspiring to the people you want to learn from. Instead of asking, "What can this person do for me?" ask, "What can I do for this person?" Instead of trying to take value, focus on creating value. Instead of seeking mentorship, focus on earning mentorship through your actions and commitment. The relationships that transform your life are built on mutual value, not one-sided benefit. Here's how to start upgrading your environment today. First, audit your current relationships. Identify the people who inspire you, challenge you, and support your growth. These are your growth relationships. Invest more time and energy here. Then identify the people who drain your energy, encourage your worst habits, or keep you stuck in limiting patterns. These are your maintenance relationships. Limit your time here. Second, identify the type of person you need to become to achieve your goals. What kind of thinking do they have? What kind of habits? What kind of standards? Now look for people who already embody these qualities. Third, put yourself in environments where these people spend time. This might mean joining professional organizations, attending conferences, participating in online communities, or taking courses. Fourth, focus on giving before getting. Look for ways to help, contribute, and add value before asking for anything in return. Relationships are built on reciprocity, but someone has to go first. Remember, the goal isn't to use people or to abandon everyone who isn't successful. The goal is to be intentional about your relationships and to surround yourself with people who bring out your best. Some of your oldest relationships might need to change form, but not necessarily end. You might need to love some people from a distance. You might need to set boundaries with people who don't respect your growth. This is difficult, but it's necessary. Your future self is depending on the relationship decisions you make today. The people around you are either elevating you or tolerating you. They're either inspiring you to grow or enabling you to stay the same. They're either expanding your possibilities or confirming your limitations. Choose your tribe carefully. Your life depends on it. Chapter 10. Habit 5. Obsession with growth. Winners don't seek balance, they seek expansion. While others try to maintain equilibrium, winners are constantly pushing the boundaries of what they thought was possible. This is habit 5, obsession with growth. Not casual interest in improvement, not occasional efforts at development. Obsession, a relentless, never-ending commitment to becoming more than you were yesterday. Most people approach growth like a destination. They want to reach a certain level of success, income, or achievement, and then maintain it. They see growth as something you do until you arrive at your goal, then you can relax and enjoy what you've built. But winners understand that growth isn't a destination, it's a lifestyle. It's not something you do until you succeed, it's the reason you succeed, and the way you continue succeeding. Here's why this matters. In a rapidly changing world, standing still is moving backward. The skills that got you here won't get you there. The strategies that worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. The person you are today might not be capable of creating the life you want tomorrow. Growth isn't optional. It's mandatory for anyone who wants to stay relevant, competitive, and fulfilled. The moment you stop growing, you start dying. The moment you think you know enough, you start becoming irrelevant. This is why winners are obsessed with growth. They understand that their greatest asset isn't what they know, it's their ability to learn. Their greatest strength isn't what they can do, it's their capacity to adapt. But obsession with growth isn't about frantically consuming information or constantly starting new projects. It's about systematic intentional development across the key areas of your life. Winners think in terms of what I call growth portfolios, deliberate investments in different types of development, skill growth, constantly developing capabilities that increase your value and effectiveness. This might mean learning new technologies, mastering advanced techniques in your field, or developing leadership abilities. Knowledge growth, expanding your understanding of your industry, your market, and the world. This means reading voraciously, studying trends, and staying informed about developments that could affect your future. Network growth, building relationships with people who can teach you, challenge you, and open doors for you. This means actively seeking connections with people who are where you want to be. Experience growth, deliberately putting yourself in new situations that test your abilities and expand your comfort zone. This means taking on challenging projects, pursuing stretch assignments, and saying yes to opportunities that scare you. Character growth, developing the internal qualities that sustain long-term success. This means working on discipline, integrity, resilience, and emotional intelligence. The key is to be growing in all these areas simultaneously, not just focusing on one while neglecting the others. Here's what obsession with growth looks like in practice. You see every experience as a learning opportunity. Success teaches you what works. Failure teaches you what doesn't. Criticism teaches you how others perceive you. Praise teaches you what you're doing right. You're not just going through experiences, you're learning from them. You're not just accumulating time, you're accumulating wisdom. You invest in your development. Like winners, invest in stocks, consistently, strategically, and with compound growth in mind. You don't wait for your company to pay for your training. You don't wait for someone else to teach you what you need to know. You take ownership of your own development. You seek discomfort because you understand that discomfort is where growth lives. Comfort is the enemy of progress. The things that challenge you, stretch you, and make you uncomfortable are the things that make you grow. This means actively seeking feedback, even when it's hard to hear. It means taking on projects that are slightly beyond your current capabilities. It means having conversations that challenge your thinking. You develop what I call beginner's mind, the humility to recognize that no matter how much you know, there's always more to learn. You approach each day with curiosity rather than certainty, with questions rather than answers. This is particularly important as you become more successful. Success can create blind spots because it confirms that your current approach is working, but what got you to your current level of success might not get you to the next level. Winners stay hungry. They celebrate their achievements, but don't rest on them. They use success as fuel for more growth, not as an excuse to stop growing. But obsession with growth requires balance between learning and applying, between consuming and creating, between absorbing and executing. Growth without application is just accumulation. Learning without doing is just entertainment. The goal isn't to know more, it's to become more capable. It's not to collect information, it's to develop wisdom. It's not to impress people with what you know, it's to create results with what you do. Here's how to develop your own obsession with growth. First, assess your current growth rate. How much time do you spend each week learning new things? How often do you seek feedback? How frequently do you challenge yourself with new experiences? Most people will discover they're growing much slower than they think. Second, create a growth plan. Just like you might have a fitness plan or a financial plan, you need a deliberate strategy for your development. What skills do you need to develop? What knowledge do you need to acquire? What experiences do you need to seek? Third, build growth rituals into your daily routine. This might mean reading for 30 minutes every morning, listening to educational podcasts during your commute, or dedicating 1 hour each week to learning a new skill. Fourth, seek growth accelerators. People, programs, or experiences that can speed up your development. This might mean hiring a coach, joining a mastermind group, or attending conferences in your field. Fifth, measure your growth. You can't manage what you don't measure. Track the books you read, the skills you develop, the feedback you receive, the challenges you overcome. This creates accountability and momentum. But here's the most important aspect of growth obsession. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming unstoppable. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them faster than your competition. Growth obsession gives you what I call compound confidence, confidence that builds on itself over time. Every new skill you develop makes the next skill easier to learn. Every challenge you overcome makes the next challenge less intimidating. Every improvement you make increases your capacity for more improvement. This creates what economists call increasing returns, where your investments in growth pay bigger and bigger dividends over time. Your ability to learn becomes an asset that generates more assets. In a world where change is the only constant, your ability to grow and adapt becomes your ultimate competitive advantage. It's the skill that makes all other skills possible, the habit that enables all other habits. If you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not expanding, you're contracting. If you're not becoming more, you're becoming less. The question isn't whether you can afford to be obsessed with growth. The question is whether you can afford not to be. Your future depends on who you become, not just what you do, and who you become depends on how committed you are to growing into that person. Stay hungry. Stay curious. Stay growing. Chapter 11. How Winners Think When They Fail. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first television job and told she was unfit for television. Steve Jobs was ousted from the very company he founded. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination and having no good ideas. These aren't stories of people who avoided failure. These are stories of people who understood something most never will. Failure isn't the opposite of winning. It's the raw material of winning. Welcome to Chapter 11 of The Winner's Code, where we explore how winners think when they fail. Because here's what I need you to understand right now. You will fail, and that's not a warning. It's a promise. And more importantly, it's a gift. The difference between winners and everyone else isn't that winners don't fail. It's that they've cracked the code on what failure actually means. While others see failure as evidence that they're not cut out for success, winners see failure as data. While others see failure as a dead end, winners see it as a detour with valuable information. This mindset shift is foundational to the winner's code. You see, the 7 habits we're building throughout this journey all depend on one crucial understanding. Your relationship with failure determines your relationship with success. They're not opposites. They're dance partners. Let me introduce you to what I call the failure equation. Most people think it looks like this. Attempt plus failure equals defeat. But winners have rewritten that equation. For them, it looks like this. Attempt plus failure plus learning equals progress. That single addition, learning, transforms everything. But learning from failure isn't automatic. It requires a specific way of thinking, a particular lens through which to view setbacks. This is where habit 1 begins to show its power. Winners take extreme ownership of their failures. They don't blame the market, the timing, their team, or bad luck. They ask one question. What could I have done differently? This isn't about self-flagellation or toxic positivity. It's about power. When you take ownership of your failures, you take back the power to change the outcome next time. When you blame external factors, you surrender that power to forces outside your control. I remember working with an entrepreneur who'd lost everything in a failed startup. His first instinct was to blame his investors for pulling out, the market for shifting, his partners for not executing. But when we dug deeper, he realized he'd ignored warning signs, avoided difficult conversations, and made decisions based on hope rather than data. That realization was painful, but it was also liberating. It meant he could do better next time. This connects directly to habit 2. Winners control their emotional state. Failure triggers our most primitive responses. The fight or flight system doesn't distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and a failed business deal. Your nervous system treats them the same way, but winners have trained themselves to short-circuit this response. They've learned what I call the 24-48-7 rule. Give yourself 24 hours to feel the full weight of the failure. Don't suppress it. Don't bypass it. Feel it completely. Then give yourself 48 hours to analyze what happened without judgment. What were the factors? What were the decisions? What were the results? Finally, give yourself 7 days to extract the lessons and plan your next move. This systematic approach prevents you from making decisions from an emotional state while still honoring the very real impact of failure. Because here's the truth. Failure hurts. If it doesn't hurt, you probably didn't care enough in the first place. But winners understand something profound about pain. Pain is information. Physical pain tells you something is wrong with your body. Emotional pain tells you something matters to you. The pain of failure is your psyche's way of saying, this is important. Pay attention. Learn from this. This brings us to habit 3. Winners think in systems, not goals. When most people fail, they think they failed at achieving a goal. When winners fail, they examine their system. Was the system flawed? Was the execution flawed? Or was the system fine but the timeline unrealistic? Let me give you an example. Say you set a goal to lose 20 pounds in 3 months, but you only lose 5. Most people see this as failure. Winners see this as data about their system. Maybe the nutrition plan was too restrictive and led to binge eating. Maybe the workout routine was too ambitious and led to burnout. Maybe the goal was fine, but the timeline was unrealistic. By focusing on the system rather than the goal, winners turn every failure into system optimization. They're not failing, they're debugging. This systematic thinking is crucial because it prevents what psychologists call learned helplessness. When people fail repeatedly without understanding why, they begin to believe that success is out of their control. But when you understand that failure is usually a system problem, not a personal inadequacy, you maintain your sense of agency. Habit 4 comes into play here. Winners design their environment for success. Most people try to willpower their way through failure. Winners examine their environment and ask, what in my environment made this failure more likely? Maybe they were trying to eat healthy while keeping junk food in the house. Maybe they were trying to focus while working in a noisy, chaotic space. Maybe they were trying to build a business while surrounding themselves with people who thought entrepreneurship was too risky. Winners understand that you are not separate from your environment. You are part of a system that includes your physical space, your social circle, your information diet, and your daily routines. When the system fails, they don't blame themselves. They redesign the system. This is where the winner's code really begins to differentiate itself from traditional self-help. Most approaches focus on changing yourself. The winner's code focuses on changing your system, and then becoming the person who naturally operates within that system. Habit 5 shows up powerfully in how winners handle failure. They compound their efforts, while others see failure as evidence that they should quit or change direction dramatically. Winners see failure as proof that they're doing something significant enough to encounter resistance. They understand what I call the proximity principle. The bigger the failure, the closer you probably were to a breakthrough. This isn't mystical thinking. It's practical. When you're attempting something easy, failure is unlikely, but the rewards are small. When you're attempting something significant, failure is more likely, but the lessons are more valuable, and the eventual rewards are exponentially bigger. Winners compound their failures just like they compound their successes. Each failure builds knowledge, resilience, and capability for the next attempt. They're not starting over, they're starting higher. This mindset requires tremendous emotional maturity. It requires you to separate your identity from your results. This is perhaps the hardest lesson in the winner's code. You are not your failures, but you are responsible for learning from them. Most people oscillate between two equally destructive extremes. Either they over-identify with their failures, I'm a failure, or they deflect responsibility for them. It wasn't my fault. Winners find the narrow path between these extremes. I failed, but I am not a failure. I was responsible, and I will learn. This distinction is crucial because it allows winners to maintain their self-worth while honestly examining their performance. They can ask hard questions without destroying their confidence. They can acknowledge mistakes without falling into shame spirals. Here's what I want you to understand. The way you think about failure isn't just about bouncing back from setbacks. It's about fundamentally rewiring your relationship with risk, growth, and possibility. When you no longer fear failure, you become willing to attempt things that others won't. You become willing to iterate faster, experiment more boldly, and play bigger games. The winner's code isn't about avoiding failure, it's about failing forward faster than your competition. It's about extracting maximum value from every setback, and using that value to fuel your next attempt. As we move deeper into this journey, remember, every winner you admire has a secret. They've all failed more than you've even tried. They've just learned to think about those failures differently. They've cracked the code on turning setbacks into setups for comebacks. Your failures aren't evidence that you're not meant for success. They're proof that you're brave enough to try. Now let's learn how to make that bravery strategic, systematic, and ultimately unstoppable. At Chapter 12, Habit 6, Precision over Perfection. There's a pottery class experiment I want you to imagine. On the first day, the teacher divides the students into two groups. Group A is told they'll be graded purely on the quantity of pots they produce. 50 pounds of pots gets an A, 40 pounds gets a B, and so on. Group B is told they'll be graded on quality. They only need to produce one pot, but it has to be perfect. At the end of the semester, something remarkable happens. The highest quality pots come from Group A, the quantity group, while Group B spent the entire semester theorizing about perfection, planning the perfect pot, and second-guessing every decision. Group A was busy making pot after pot, learning from each attempt, and gradually improving their craft. This experiment reveals one of the most counterintuitive truths in the winner's code: perfection is the enemy of excellence. And habit 6, precision over perfection, might be the most liberating habit you'll ever develop. Welcome to Chapter 12, where we explore why winners consistently choose precision over perfection, and how this single shift in thinking can accelerate your progress exponentially. Let's start by understanding what we mean by precision versus perfection. Perfection is about getting everything right before you start. Precision is about getting the right things right as you go. Perfection is static. Precision is dynamic. Perfection seeks to eliminate all possibility of error. Precision seeks to eliminate only the errors that matter. Winners understand that perfection is not just impossible, it's undesirable. Here's why. The pursuit of perfection creates what psychologists call analysis paralysis. When you're trying to make something perfect, you never stop. You research endlessly, plan obsessively, and prepare perpetually. Meanwhile, your competition is out there making mistakes, learning from them, and getting better. But more importantly, perfection assumes you can predict the future. It assumes you know exactly what perfect looks like before you begin. But in a rapidly changing world, what looked perfect yesterday might be irrelevant today. Precision, on the other hand, assumes you'll learn as you go and adjust accordingly. This connects directly to habit 1, taking extreme ownership. When you embrace precision over perfection, you take ownership not just of your results, but of your learning process. You acknowledge that you don't have all the answers yet, and that's not a weakness, it's a strength. It means you're still growing. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. When Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, talks about their first product launch, he says they were embarrassed by it. The platform was clunky, limited, and had numerous bugs. But they launched anyway, because they understood that embarrassment was better than irrelevance. They chose precision, focusing on the core functionality that mattered over perfection. That embarrassing launch taught them more about their users in 3 months than 3 years of planning ever could have. They learned what features people actually used, what problems really mattered, and what their assumptions had been wrong about. That knowledge allowed them to build a platform that eventually connected over 700 million professionals worldwide. This is the power of precision thinking. Instead of asking, "How can I make this perfect?" winners ask, "What's the minimum viable version that delivers maximum learning?" Instead of trying to anticipate every possible problem, they focus on solving the problems they know exist right now. This mindset shift requires embracing what I call intelligent imperfection. This doesn't mean being sloppy or careless. It means being strategic about where you invest your perfectionist tendencies. Winners understand that not all details are created equal. Some details matter enormously, others are just detail. Habit 2. Controlling your emotional state becomes crucial here because perfectionism is usually driven by fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough. These fears create an emotional state that prioritizes safety over growth, comfort over progress. Winners have learned to recognize perfectionism as a disguised form of procrastination. When you catch yourself saying, "I just need to research a little more," or "I want to make sure I get this right," ask yourself, am I seeking knowledge or avoiding action? This is why winners are comfortable with what I call progressive perfection. They don't try to create perfection in one attempt. They create a system that allows them to approach perfection through iteration. Each cycle through the system produces a better version than the last. Think about software development. No successful software company waits until they have the perfect product before launching. They launch with a minimum viable product, gather user feedback, and then iterate rapidly. Each version is more precise than the last, because it's informed by real-world data rather than theoretical perfection. This iterative approach requires habit 4, designing your environment for success. Perfectionists create environments that enable endless revision and postponement. Winners create environments that force action and facilitate learning. They set deadlines, create accountability systems, and remove the option to endlessly tinker. One of the most powerful environmental changes winners make is embracing what I call public accountability. When you commit to delivering something publicly by a specific date, you eliminate the option of perfectionist delay. Your environment forces you to choose precision over perfection, because the cost of missing the deadline exceeds the cost of delivering something imperfect. This is where habit 5, compounding your efforts, becomes revolutionary. Perfectionists try to compound perfection, which is impossible. Winners compound precision, which creates exponential improvement over time. Each good enough attempt teaches you something that makes the next attempt better. Each iteration builds on the last, creating compound learning. Here's a practical framework for implementing precision over perfection. The MVP mindset. MVP originally stood for minimum viable product in startup culture, but I want you to think of it as minimum valuable progress. Before starting any project, ask yourself, what's the smallest version of this that would deliver value? What's the minimum I could do that would teach me something important? What's the simplest approach that would move me forward? And commit to delivering that MVP by a specific deadline, regardless of how perfect it feels. This framework forces you to identify what really matters and eliminates the perfectionist paralysis that stops most people from starting. But here's the crucial point. Precision doesn't mean low standards. It means strategic standards. Winners have extremely high standards for the things that matter most, and consciously relaxed standards for everything else. They're perfectionists about their priorities and pragmatists about everything else. This strategic approach to quality requires emotional maturity. You have to be comfortable with people seeing your work before it's perfect. You have to be willing to receive feedback on something that you know could be better. You have to resist the ego-driven desire to impress people with your thoroughness and instead focus on impressing them with your results. The truth is, most people don't notice the imperfections you're worried about. They notice whether your work solves their problem, serves their needs, or delivers value to their lives. And they notice whether you're the kind of person who delivers consistently, or the kind who promises perfection, but rarely delivers anything. Winners understand that consistency beats perfection every time. A good plan, executed consistently, will always outperform a perfect plan that never gets implemented. A decent product that ships beats a perfect product that doesn't. An imperfect email sent beats a perfect email never written. This doesn't mean abandoning excellence. It means redefining excellence as the ability to consistently deliver valuable work, rather than the ability to occasionally deliver flawless work. It means measuring excellence by impact, rather than by the absence of imperfection. As you begin implementing this habit, start small. Choose one area of your life where perfectionism is holding you back. Maybe it's a project you've been planning forever, a skill you've been meaning to develop, or a conversation you've been avoiding until you find the perfect words. Apply the MVP mindset. What's the minimum valuable progress you could make today? What's good enough to get started? What would teach you something important, even if it's not perfect? Then take that action. Deliver that imperfect work. Start that imperfect project. Have that imperfect conversation. And notice what happens. Notice that the world doesn't end. Notice that people often appreciate your effort more than they would have appreciated your perfection. Notice that you learn more from taking action than you ever learned from planning. Most importantly, notice that you're moving forward while the perfectionists are still planning. You're building momentum while they're building anxiety. You're creating value while they're creating excuses. Precision over perfection isn't just a habit, it's a philosophy of progress. It's the understanding that done is better than perfect, that action is better than planning, and that learning is better than knowing. It's the recognition that excellence is not a destination but a direction, not a standard, but a process. As we continue building your winner's code, remember, you don't have to be perfect to be valuable. You just have to be precise about what matters and persistent about getting better. That's not settling for mediocrity, that's the path to mastery. Chapter 13. The habit that makes all others stick. There's a moment in every transformation journey when you realize something profound. You're no longer forcing yourself to do the right things. You're just being yourself. The habits that once required discipline and willpower now feel natural, automatic, even inevitable. You've crossed the invisible line from doing to being. This is the moment when identity alignment kicks in, and it's the secret that makes all other habits stick permanently. Welcome to Chapter 13, where we explore the most powerful habit in the winner's code, one so fundamental that it determines whether all the others will become part of who you are, or just temporary behaviors you abandon when motivation fades. Here's what most people get wrong about habits. They think habits are about doing. Winners understand that lasting habits are about being. The difference isn't semantic, it's everything. When you try to build habits from the outside in, you're fighting against your identity. Your current identity looks at these new behaviors and says, "This isn't who we are. This doesn't fit. Let's go back to what feels normal." And eventually your identity wins. It always does. But when you build habits from the inside out, when you start by shifting your identity and then align your behaviors with that new identity, something magical happens. The habits don't feel forced anymore. They feel like natural expressions of who you are. Let me give you an example. There are two ways to approach getting in shape. The first way is to force yourself to go to the gym and eat healthy foods while still thinking of yourself as someone who's not athletic or not disciplined about health. You might succeed for weeks or even months, but eventually your identity will reassert itself. You'll find reasons to skip workouts and make exceptions for your diet, because deep down, you don't see these behaviors as authentic to who you are. The second way is to first shift your identity. You begin seeing yourself as someone who prioritizes health, who values physical fitness, who makes decisions based on long-term well-being rather than short-term convenience. When this identity shift happens, going to the gym isn't something you force yourself to do, it's something healthy people do. Eating well isn't a restriction, it's how people who value their health naturally behave. This is the power of identity alignment, and it's why this habit makes all others stick. Your behaviors will always seek to align with your identity. The question is, are you consciously designing that identity, or are you letting it be shaped by your past, your circumstances, and your unconscious patterns? Winners take extreme ownership. Habit 1 of their identity. They don't see identity as something fixed that they have to work around. They see it as something fluid that they can consciously craft. They understand that identity is not who you were born to be, it's who you choose to become. This connects directly to emotional state control. Habit 2. Your identity shapes your emotional state, and your emotional state reinforces your identity. If you see yourself as someone who's always stressed, you'll unconsciously maintain behaviors and thought patterns that create stress because stress feels familiar and authentic to that identity. But if you begin seeing yourself as someone who remains calm under pressure, you'll naturally develop the emotional regulation skills that support that identity. The process of identity alignment begins with what I call identity investigation. You need to examine your current identity with the same objectivity you'd examine a business strategy. What stories do you tell yourself about who you are? What limitations do you accept as just how I am? What capabilities do you dismiss as not my thing? Most people have never consciously examined their identity. They've inherited it from their family, absorbed it from their environment, or constructed it from their past experiences. But winners understand that your past experiences don't determine your future identity. Your future identity determines your future experiences. Here's a powerful exercise. Write down the identity statements you currently hold about yourself. Start with "I am someone" and fill in the blanks. Don't edit yourself. Write down everything that comes to mind, both positive and negative. Then ask yourself, which of these identity statements serve my goals, and which ones limit them? Which ones empower me, and which ones constrain me? Which ones are based on evidence, and which ones are based on outdated stories I've been telling myself? This investigation often reveals something surprising. Many of your identity statements aren't based on current reality. They're based on who you were years ago, or who other people told you that you were, or who you think you have to be based on your circumstances. But here's the liberating truth. Identity is not fixed. It's a story you tell yourself about yourself, and like any story, it can be rewritten. Winners understand this and actively craft their identity to support their goals rather than letting their goals be limited by their identity. This is where systems thinking habit 3 becomes crucial. Your identity is not a single belief but a system of interconnected beliefs, stories, and self-concepts. When you try to change just one element without addressing the the system will pull you back to equilibrium. But when you consciously redesign the system, all the elements begin supporting each other. For example, if you want to develop the identity of someone who builds successful businesses, you can't just change how you think about entrepreneurship. You also need to examine your beliefs about money, risk, failure, leadership, and time management. You need to address your stories about whether you're smart enough, connected enough, or experienced enough. You need to look at the whole system and redesign it coherently. This systematic approach to identity change is what separates lasting transformation from temporary behavior modification. When you change behavior without changing identity, you get short-term results that don't stick. When you change identity first, the behaviors naturally follow and become sustainable. Environmental design, Habit 4, plays a crucial role in identity alignment. Your environment either reinforces your current identity or supports your desired identity. If you want to see yourself as a reader, but your environment is filled with distractions and contains no books, your environment is voting against your desired identity every day. Winners consciously design their environment to reinforce their chosen identity. If they want to be someone who prioritizes health, they stock their kitchen with healthy foods and remove junk food. If they want to be someone who builds wealth, they surround themselves with books about finance and connect with other people who prioritize financial growth. If they want to be a creator, they set up a workspace that makes creation easy and consumption difficult. But environmental design goes deeper than just physical space. It includes your information environment, what you read, watch, and listen to. It includes your social environment, who you spend time with, and whose opinions you value. It includes your digital environment, what apps you use, what websites you visit, what notifications you allow. Every element of your environment is either reinforcing the identity you want to develop, or pulling you back toward the identity you want to leave behind. Winners audit their environment regularly and make conscious choices about what stays and what goes. The compound effect, Habit 5, is particularly powerful when applied to identity. Small, consistent actions that align with your desired identity compound over time into unshakable self-concept. Each time you act in alignment with your chosen identity, you're casting a vote for that version of yourself. Each vote makes the identity stronger and more authentic. This is why winners focus on what I call identity evidence. They don't just visualize who they want to become. They consistently take small actions that prove to themselves that they're becoming that person. If they want to be a writer, they write every day, even if it's just for 10 minutes. If they want to be an entrepreneur, they start learning business skills and networking with other entrepreneurs. If they want to be a leader, they look for opportunities to practice leadership in small ways. Each action becomes evidence for the new identity. And as the evidence accumulates, the identity becomes more real, more automatic, and more sustainable. You're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're becoming someone you choose to be. But here's where most people get stuck. They try to make massive identity shifts overnight. They go from seeing themselves as completely undisciplined to expecting themselves to have perfect discipline. They go from thinking they're bad with money to expecting themselves to make perfect financial decisions. This approach almost always backfires, because the gap between current identity and desired identity is too large to bridge quickly. Winners understand the power of incremental identity shifts. They don't try to become a completely different person overnight. They focus on becoming a slightly better version of themselves consistently. They might go from "I'm someone who never exercises" to "I'm someone who's starting to prioritize health," to "I'm someone who values fitness," to "I'm someone who maintains excellent physical condition." Each step feels authentic and achievable. This gradual approach prevents what psychologists call identity threat. When you try to change too much too fast, your current identity feels threatened and fights back. You experience internal resistance, self-sabotage, and eventually reversion to old patterns. But when you make small, consistent shifts, your identity evolves naturally without triggering this defensive response. The precision over perfection mindset from Habit 6 is essential here. You don't need to perfectly embody your desired identity immediately. You just need to consistently act in ways that align with that identity. Each aligned action is progress, even if it's not perfect. This is also where the growth mindset becomes crucial. Fixed mindset says, "I am who I am." Growth mindset says, "I am who I'm becoming." Winners consistently choose the growth mindset. because it allows them to see their current identity as a starting point rather than a destination. Here's a practical framework for implementing identity alignment. Start by choosing one identity shift that would have the biggest positive impact on your life. Maybe it's seeing yourself as someone who follows through on commitments, or someone who prioritizes learning, or someone who builds meaningful relationships. Then identify the smallest daily action that someone with that identity would take. If you want to be someone who follows through, maybe you commit to making your bed every morning and keeping that commitment no matter what. If you want to be someone who prioritizes learning, maybe you read for 10 minutes every day. If you want to be someone who builds relationships, maybe you reach out to one person every day. The key is consistency over intensity. You're not trying to transform overnight. You're trying to cast daily votes for your desired identity. Each vote matters. Each action is evidence. Each day is an opportunity to reinforce who you're becoming. As you implement this habit, you'll notice something remarkable happening. The other habits in your winner's code will become easier, more natural, more sustainable. You won't have to force yourself to take ownership. You'll be someone who naturally takes ownership. You won't have to remember to control your emotional state. You'll be someone who naturally maintains emotional equilibrium. This is the power of identity alignment. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. And when who you are aligns with where you want to go, the journey becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Your identity is your most powerful tool for lasting change. Use it consciously, craft it deliberately, and watch as every other habit in your life becomes not something you do, but something you are. Chapter 14, Habit 7, Playing Infinite Games. In 1961, a young president stood before the American people and made an audacious declaration: "We will land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before this decade is out." It was a goal so ambitious that the technology to achieve it didn't even exist yet. Critics called it impossible, impractical, a waste of resources. But John F. Kennedy wasn't playing a finite game, he was playing an infinite game. The difference between these two approaches to life will determine everything about your trajectory, your legacy, and your ultimate fulfillment. Welcome to Chapter 14, where we explore Habit 7, Playing Infinite Games, the habit that separates those who achieve temporary success from those who build lasting legacies. Let me explain the difference. Finite games are played to win. They have defined rules, clear endpoints, and identifiable winners and losers. Think of sports competitions, quarterly earnings reports, or academic degrees. The purpose of a finite game is to end the game by winning. Infinite games are played to keep playing. They have evolving rules, no clear endpoint, and the purpose is not to win, but to perpetuate the game itself. Think of building a marriage, raising children, creating art, or building a company culture. The purpose of an infinite game is to ensure the game continues. Most people spend their entire lives playing finite games, while wondering why they feel unfulfilled even when they win. They optimize for short-term victories, quarterly results, and immediate gratification. They play to beat their competition instead of transcending it. They focus on winning the game instead of changing the game. Winners understand something profound. The most meaningful achievements in life come from playing infinite games. And once you learn to think infinitely, everything changes. Your decisions, your relationships, your career, your entire approach to success. This connects directly to taking extreme ownership. Habit 1. When you're playing finite games, you take ownership of outcomes. When you're playing infinite games, you take ownership of the process, the system, and the long-term trajectory. You're not just responsible for this quarter's results, you're responsible for building something that can thrive for decades. Think about the difference between a CEO who's focused on this year's stock price versus one who's building a company that will still be valuable in 50 years. The finite game player makes decisions based on immediate market reactions. The infinite game player makes decisions based on long-term value creation, even if it means sacrificing short-term gains. This long-term thinking requires emotional state control. Habit 2. Because infinite games often involve short-term setbacks that serve long-term purposes. When you're playing an infinite game, you have to remain emotionally stable during periods when finite game players are winning, and you appear to be losing. Amazon is a perfect example of this. For years, Jeff Bezos was criticized for not maximizing short-term profit. Wall Street wanted him to play the finite game of quarterly earnings optimization. Instead, he played the infinite game of building long-term value and market dominance. He was willing to lose finite games, quarterly profit comparisons, to win the infinite game of becoming the everything store. This requires what I call temporal wisdom, the ability to think across multiple time horizons simultaneously. Infinite game players are making decisions today that won't pay off for years or even decades. They're planting seeds they may never see fully grown, building foundations for achievements they may not personally enjoy. This connects to systems thinking. Habit 3. Finite games focus on individual events and outcome. Infinite games focus on systems and processes that create sustainable advantage over time. Instead of asking, "How do I win this particular competition?" infinite players ask, "How do I build a system that consistently creates value regardless of changing conditions?" Consider the difference between someone who wants to lose 20 pounds for a wedding versus someone who wants to build lifelong health. The finite player focuses on rapid weight loss using unsustainable methods. The infinite player focuses on building sustainable habits that create long-term health and vitality. One achieves short-term success, but often regains the weight. The other achieves lasting transformation. Environmental design. Habit 4 becomes crucial for infinite game players because they're designing environments that need to function well over decades, not months. They're not just optimizing for current productivity, they're creating conditions that enable continuous growth, adaptation, and evolution. This means building redundancy into their systems, creating multiple pathways to success, and designing for anti-fragility systems that get stronger under stress rather than breaking down. Finite players optimize for efficiency, infinite players optimize for resilience. The compound effect, habit 5, is where infinite games really shine. Finite players focus on linear progress and immediate results. Infinite players focus on exponential curves and delayed gratification. They understand that compound effects take time to manifest, but when they do, they create almost magical results. Warren Buffett embodies this perfectly. While other investors focused on quarterly returns, Buffett focused on building compound annual returns over decades. The result: he became one of the wealthiest people in human history, not by being the best investor in any given year, but by being consistently good over an extraordinarily long period. Precision over perfection. Habit 6 is essential for infinite players because they understand that perfectionism kills momentum, and momentum is everything in infinite games. They're not trying to create perfect products or perfect strategies, they're trying to create adaptive systems that improve over time. This is why infinite players are comfortable with what I call strategic imperfection. They launch before they're ready, iterate based on feedback, and constantly evolve their approach. They understand that in infinite games, adaptation matters more than optimization, learning matters more than knowing, and resilience matters more than efficiency. But here's where infinite thinking gets really interesting. It changes how you define success itself. Finite players define success as beating the competition. Infinite players define success as transcending the competition, making the competition irrelevant by changing the entire game. Netflix didn't beat Blockbuster at the video rental game. They made the video rental game obsolete by creating a new game streaming entertainment. Tesla didn't beat traditional automakers at making cars. They changed the game from internal combustion to electric vehicles, from car ownership to sustainable transportation. This is the power of infinite thinking. Instead of playing the game better, you create a better game. This mindset shift requires identity alignment, the habit that makes all others stick. You have to see yourself not as someone competing in existing games, but as someone who creates new games. Not as someone who follows rules, but as someone who writes rules. Not as someone who adapts to the market, but as someone who creates markets. This identity shift is profound because it changes your relationship with competition, failure, and success. When you're playing finite games, competitors are threats to be defeated. When you're playing infinite games, competitors are either irrelevant because you're playing a different game, or potential collaborators because growing the overall game benefits everyone. Let me give you a personal example. When I started building my business, I initially played the finite game of trying to be better than other consultants in my space. I focused on beating their pricing, outdoing their marketing, and stealing their clients. It was exhausting, stressful, and ultimately limiting. because I was constrained by the size of the existing market. Then I shifted to infinite thinking. Instead of trying to be the best consultant in my niche, I focused on creating a new category entirely. Instead of competing for existing clients, I focused on creating new types of value that didn't exist before. Instead of playing by industry rules, I created my own rules. The result? I stopped having competitors and started having imitators. I stopped fighting for market share and started creating new markets. I stopped playing finite games I might win and started playing infinite games I couldn't lose. This shift requires long-term thinking that most people find uncomfortable. For example, if you're currently playing the finite game of climbing the corporate ladder, the infinite version might be building skills and relationships that create multiple pathways to success. If you're playing the finite game of accumulating wealth, the infinite version might be building systems that create lasting value and impact. This shift requires what I call legacy thinking. Instead of asking, "What do I want to achieve?" infinite players ask, "What do I want to build?" Instead of "How do I win?" they ask, "How do I contribute?" Instead of "What's in it for me?" they ask, "What can I create that will outlast me?" Legacy thinking doesn't mean you have to sacrifice personal success. It means you achieve personal success as a byproduct of creating something larger than yourself. The most successful people in history weren't focused primarily on their own success. They were focused on building something that would continue to create value long after they were gone. Think about the founders of great institutions, universities, companies, movements. They weren't playing to win. They were playing to build something that would keep playing long after they were gone. Harvard University has been playing for nearly 400 years. The institutions they built have transcended their individual lives and continue creating value for millions of people. This is the ultimate power of infinite thinking. It allows you to participate in something larger than your individual existence. It connects your daily actions to purposes that transcend your personal ambitions. It transforms work from something you do to get something into something you do to build something. But infinite thinking isn't just about grand gestures and massive institutions. It applies to every area of your life. You can play infinite games in your relationships by focusing on deepening connection rather than winning arguments. You can play infinite games in your health by building sustainable habits rather than pursuing quick fixes. You can play infinite games in your learning by developing wisdom rather than just accumulating information. The key is to identify what you want to keep playing rather than what you want to stop playing. What games do you want to be engaged in for the rest of your life? What activities, relationships, and pursuits would you want to continue even if there were no external rewards? These are your infinite games, and they deserve your best thinking, your most consistent effort, and your long-term commitment. As you begin implementing this habit, start small. Choose one area of your life where you can shift from finite to infinite thinking. Maybe it's your approach to fitness, your relationship with learning, or your strategy for building wealth. Apply the infinite mindset. Focus on systems rather than goals, processes rather than outcomes, contribution rather than accumulation. Notice how this shift changes your daily decisions. Notice how it reduces anxiety about short-term setbacks. Notice how it increases your willingness to invest in long-term growth. Notice how it connects your individual actions to purposes larger than yourself. Most importantly, notice how it changes your relationship with time itself. Finite players are always racing against time, trying to achieve as much as possible before some arbitrary deadline. Infinite players are collaborating with time, using it as an ally in building something that compounds and grows stronger over decades. This is the essence of playing infinite games, transforming from someone who tries to beat time to someone who partners with time, from someone who seeks to win games to someone who creates games worth playing, from someone who pursues success to someone who builds legacies. The world needs more infinite players. People who think beyond the next quarter, the next election cycle, the next trend. People who build bridges rather than walls, who create rather than consume, who plant trees under whose shade they may never sit. As we approach the final chapter of this journey, remember, the winner's code isn't ultimately about winning finite games. It's about designing a life game so compelling, so valuable, and so sustainable that you never want it to end. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't just achieve success, but who creates success for others, long after you're gone. That's not just winning, that's transcending the very concept of winning and entering the realm of building, creating, and leaving the world better than you found it. Chapter 15. The code is yours now. There's a moment in every hero's journey when the mentor steps back and says, "You have everything you need now. The rest is up to you." This is that moment. We've traveled through the 7 habits that form the winner's code. We've explored the mindset shifts that separate those who dream from those who achieve. We've dismantled the illusions that keep most people trapped in mediocrity. But understanding is not enough. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. Welcome to Chapter 15. The code is yours now. This isn't just the conclusion of a book, it's the beginning of your new life. Everything we've discussed up to this point was preparation. Now comes the real work, becoming the person who lives these principles naturally, consistently, and powerfully. Let's start by acknowledging what you now possess that most people will never have: a complete system for sustainable success. Not tips, not tricks, not motivational platitudes. A code, a set of integrated principles that work together to create compound results over time. You now understand that habit 1, taking extreme ownership, isn't about blame or responsibility, it's about power. When you own everything in your life completely, you reclaim the power to change everything in your life completely. You've learned to ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "How is this happening for me? And what can I learn from it?" You've discovered that habit 2, controlling your emotional state, isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending to be positive. It's about becoming the architect of your internal experience, rather than the victim of external circumstances. You've learned that your emotional state is not something that happens to you. It's something you create, manage, and direct. You've embraced habit 3, thinking in systems rather than goals. You understand that goals are just waypoints in larger systems, and that sustainable success comes from building processes that naturally produce the outcomes you want. You've learned to focus on inputs rather than outcomes, knowing that when you perfect the inputs, the outputs take care of themselves. You've implemented habit 4, designing your environment for success. You understand that willpower is a finite resource, but environmental design is infinite. You've learned to create conditions that make success inevitable and failure difficult, rather than relying on motivation and discipline alone. You've harnessed habit 5, the compound effect. You understand that small, consistent actions compound over time into extraordinary results. You've learned to think exponentially rather than linearly, and to make decisions based on their long-term compound effects rather than their immediate outcomes. You've adopted habit 6, precision over perfection. You understand that perfection is the enemy of progress, and that consistent action beats perfect planning every time. You've learned to ship before you're ready, iterate based on feedback, and improve through action rather than analysis. And you've discovered the habit that makes all others stick: identity alignment. You understand that lasting change happens from the inside out, not the outside in. You've learned to consciously craft your identity rather than letting it be shaped by your past, and to make decisions based on who you're becoming rather than who you've been. Finally, you've learned to play infinite games, to think in decades rather than quarters, to build legacies rather than just accumulate achievements, and to create value that transcends your individual existence. These aren't just concepts you understand intellectually, they're tools you can use immediately to transform every area of your life. But understanding the tools isn't enough. Master craftsmen aren't distinguished by the tools they own, but by how skillfully they use them. So let's talk about implementation. Because the gap between knowing and doing is where most people get lost. They understand the principles, but struggle to apply them consistently. They have moments of clarity, but can't sustain the momentum. They start strong, but gradually drift back to old patterns. This happens because they try to implement everything at once, or they underestimate the power of identity inertia, or they lack a systematic approach to change. But you're not going to make those mistakes. You now have something most people lack: a proven framework for sustainable transformation. Here's your implementation strategy, based on everything we've learned together. Start with identity. Before you try to change any behaviors, spend time clarifying who you want to become. Not what you want to achieve, who you want to be. What kind of person naturally lives the 7 habits we've discussed? What would someone with that identity believe about themselves, their capabilities, and their future? Write it down. Create what I call an identity document, a clear, compelling description of the person you're becoming. Not who you are now, not who you wish you were, but who you're actively becoming through your daily choices and actions. Then choose one habit to focus on first. Not all 7. 1. The habit that would have the biggest positive impact on your life if you mastered it completely. Maybe it's taking extreme ownership because you've been blaming external circumstances for your results. Maybe it's emotional state control because you've been letting moods and reactions dictate your decisions. Maybe it's systems thinking because you've been chasing goals without building processes. Choose the one that resonates most deeply, the one that feels most urgent, the one that would create the most positive cascade effects in other areas of your life. Now apply the precision over perfection principle to this implementation. Don't try to master the habit immediately. Don't create an elaborate plan that requires perfect execution. Instead, identify the smallest daily action that someone with your desired identity would take consistently. If you're focusing on extreme ownership, maybe you commit to asking, "What could I have done differently?" whenever something doesn't go as planned. If you're focusing on emotional state control, maybe you commit to taking 3 deep breaths before responding to any stressful situation. If you're focusing on systems thinking, maybe you commit to spending 10 minutes each morning planning your day based on processes rather than outcomes. The key is consistency over intensity. You're not trying to transform overnight. You're trying to cast daily votes for your new identity. Each vote matters. Each day is an opportunity to prove to yourself that you're becoming the person you've decided to be. Design your environment to support this single habit. Remove obstacles that make the habit harder. Create triggers that make the habit easier. Surround yourself with reminders of your new identity. Connect with people who embody the principles you're developing. Track your progress, but track the right things. Don't just track outcomes, track the actions that create outcomes. Don't just measure results. Measure consistency. Don't just celebrate big wins. Celebrate small wins that compound over time. Most importantly, be patient with the process. The compound effect takes time to manifest. Identity shifts happen gradually. Systems require time to mature. You're not building a sprint, you're building a lifetime. But here's what will happen. As you consistently apply even one of these habits, you'll begin to see evidence that supports your new identity. That evidence will make the identity feel more authentic. The more authentic it feels, the more naturally you'll act in alignment with it. The more you act in alignment with it, the more evidence you'll create. This creates a positive feedback loop that accelerates your transformation. After you've successfully integrated one habit, and this might take weeks or months, you can begin layering in the others, but always one at a time, always with patience, always with focus on identity first and behaviors second. As you go through this process, you'll encounter resistance. Your old identity will fight back. Your environment will pull you toward familiar patterns. Other people may not understand or support your changes. This isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something significant. Expect this resistance and prepare for it. Have strategies for dealing with moments of doubt, setbacks, and temporary failures. Remember that resistance is information. It tells you that you're pushing against the boundaries of your comfort zone, which is exactly where growth happens. You'll also discover something remarkable. As you embody these habits, you'll naturally attract opportunities, relationships, and circumstances that align with your new identity. The universe doesn't reward who you are, it rewards who you're becoming. As you become someone who takes ownership, controls their emotional state, thinks systematically, and plays infinite games, you'll find yourself in situations that require and reward exactly those capabilities. This isn't mystical thinking, it's practical psychology. People are drawn to individuals who embody the qualities they admire. Opportunities flow toward those who demonstrate the competence to handle them. Success compounds around those who consistently apply principles that create success. But beyond the external rewards, you'll experience something even more valuable: the deep satisfaction that comes from becoming who you're meant to be. Not who others expect you to be, not who circumstances have shaped you to be, but who you've consciously chosen to become. This is the ultimate gift of the winner's code. It doesn't just help you achieve success, it helps you become successful. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. It doesn't just improve your results, It improves your identity, and that identity transformation is permanent. External circumstances can change, markets can shift, relationships can end, but who you've become remains with you. The habits you've developed, the mindset you've cultivated, the character you've built, these become your permanent assets, your portable wealth, your unshakable foundation. As we conclude this journey together, I want you to understand something profound. You now possess knowledge that most people will never encounter. You have tools that most people will never use. You have a framework that most people will never implement. This gives you tremendous opportunity, but it also gives you tremendous responsibility, not just to yourself, but to everyone whose life you'll touch. When you embody these principles, you become a living example of what's possible. You become proof that transformation is real, that growth is achievable, that ordinary people can create extraordinary lives. Others will watch you. They'll see how you handle failure, how you approach challenges, how you build success over time. Some will be inspired, some will be curious, some will want to learn what you know. When that happens, share these principles generously. The winner's code becomes more powerful when it's shared, not hoarded. But first live it, embody it, become it. Let these habits shape your identity so completely that they feel natural, automatic, inevitable. Let them compound over time until the person you are today seems like a distant memory of who you used to be. The journey ahead won't always be easy, but it will always be worth it. You'll face moments of doubt, periods of slow progress, times when the old way seems simpler. In those moments, remember why you started. Remember the vision of who you're becoming. Remember that every choice is a vote for your identity, and you have the power to cast that vote every single day. The winner's code isn't a destination, it's a way of traveling. It's not something you achieve once, it's something you live daily. It's not a trophy you earn, it's an identity you embody. You have everything you need. The principles are proven, the framework is complete. The only thing left is the application. The code is yours now. What you do with it is entirely up to you. But I have a feeling you're going to do something extraordinary.